those are the main three things that you should think about in order to avoid the risk of, your Bitcoin being undermined and no longer serving the purpose that you need. So it is, let me make this clear. With the way things are going and the way things are heading, I don't believe that Bitcoin is on the route of failing. It is not failing. It is, by contrast, succeeding. It is doing so well beyond a lot of people's imagination. However, I do believe that there could be a scenario, if certain things happen, they could make Bitcoin fail. Fortunately, us as Bitcoiners, as people who use Bitcoin, we have ways to avoid this destiny of Bitcoin failing. And before I talk about how Bitcoin could fail and what are the things that we can do to avoid that, first let me define what I believe is the failure of Bitcoin. First, Bitcoin stops being a store of value for the people. So if people stop seeing Bitcoin as a store of value, as an asset that can preserve value and go up in price with time, this could really undermine what Bitcoin is here to achieve. Because if you look at all these Bitcoin forks, which are basically Bitcoin copies of Bitcoin that are almost identical but have certain feature that is different, such as the Bitcoin Cash and the Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision and all of that, they are basically, they can do what Bitcoin does, minus certain things that I'm not here to talk about or argue about. But because they're not being used as a store of value, and because no one perceives them as being a trustworthy asset that you can put your cash balances in, they're not a store of value, and thus no one cares about them. They are actually a failed project. And so if Bitcoin, as it is today, reaches this destiny where it stops going up in value, or even the price of Bitcoin or the value of Bitcoin drops, then I would say it failed. Okay, I would say Bitcoin has failed to do what it needs to do. Now, the second thing is Bitcoin stops being a censorship-resistant money. So let's say I want to send Bitcoin to a certain person, and this transaction that I want to do, a certain entity or a certain government does not approve of it, and they can actually ban me from doing so, from actually doing this transaction, regardless of what it is, whether it's a criminal thing, whether it's not a criminal thing. I don't care. As long as the government or an entity or centralized institution is able to censor me from doing this transaction, this means also Bitcoin failed. And these two things are kind of intertwined, because if you don't have censorship-resistant money, then that will also undermine Bitcoin's ability to be a store of value. And if Bitcoin is not really a store of value, then that also undermines its ability to be used for transacting, because if it's losing value consistently, then no one really wants to accept it, no one really wants to send it around, no one really wants to use it in that way. So these two things are intertwined. Now, as I said, fortunately there are ways to avoid these things, to avoid these risks, and it really boils down to three main things. First, us as Bitcoiners and people who use Bitcoin, we need to increase our cash balance allocation to Bitcoin as much as possible. We have the Bitcoin maxis who have like 100% of their allocation into Bitcoin. That's great. Some people are just more risk averse and don't want to allocate all of their portfolios into Bitcoin. But really, you should allocate as much as possible from your cash balances into Bitcoin. Because imagine this, let's say we live in a society that is a closed economy. Let's say it's a small village in which we don't have access to anything exterior. And in that village, you're the only person that has Bitcoin. In that scenario, no one wants Bitcoin in that village. That means your Bitcoin really is zero. Like, no one cares about it. Like, it has a value of zero. Now, imagine there's another person now who wants Bitcoin. Now, because you are able to send Bitcoin to that person, you are able to sell your Bitcoin for goods and services for that person. That what gives your Bitcoin value. Now, imagine more people in that economy have cash balances in Bitcoin. The value of Bitcoin goes up. And really, this is the most important thing that we should do and that is to increase our cash balances in Bitcoin. Because if I'm able to increase my cash balances in Bitcoin, and a lot of people do the same in the economy, that means I'm also able to transact with Bitcoin more. So the next thing us as Bitcoiners should really consider is properly using Bitcoin on chain. So if you have Bitcoin on Coinbase or any other custodian, so to speak, really you should first of all withdraw that to your self-custody wallet. That's like the first step. I know it could be intimidating to a lot of people, and it could be like a technical hurdle for a lot of people. That's why there's a lot of great services that could help you with that, including myself. You can send me an email in the description of this video, get in contact with me, and I can help you with that. I can help you set up. But there's a lot of other people also who can help you, and there's a lot of material, free material online that really great for you to educate yourself on that. So this is the first step. And the second step is actually using it on a day-to-day basis. If you have the opportunity to pay for stuff in Bitcoin, then do that. If you have the opportunity to earn something in Bitcoin, also do that. And really, this also depends on the first step. I mean, if you accumulated a lot of your cash balances into Bitcoin, then it will be so convenient for you to actually use Bitcoin for payments and to actually earn Bitcoin and stuff like that. So actually using Bitcoin on-chain. Why is that important? Because this allows Bitcoin not to be censored money. So if you only using Bitcoin on-chain, no one can actually censor you as we speak. But if you only use Bitcoin with third-party custodians, and maybe the majority of people who use Bitcoin use it through custodians, then that's going to be a problem, because in that case, the custodian can tell you what you can or cannot do with your Bitcoin, what kind of transactions are okay or not okay. So really you should use on-chain, because if you're not using Bitcoin on-chain, effectively you're not really using Bitcoin. So try to use Bitcoin as much as possible on-chain. Now, the third and last thing I want to talk about is try to run your own node. With Bitcoin, the ability to run your own node is a key feature of Bitcoin, because it allows you to really be completely self-sovereign with your money, with your finances, with your Bitcoin stack. Because when you run your own node, first of all, you can relay your own transactions. That gives you privacy. And secondly, you can verify the entire Bitcoin blockchain. So you can have it with you, and be sure that what you see maybe on mempool.space or any other Bitcoin blockchain explorer is actually happening in real time. And thirdly, when you run your own node, you can run the software that you most align with. So we all know that Bitcoin has core developers, and basically they suggest changes and they implement changes onto Bitcoin. But the change that is being implemented can only be worth something if enough people actually run the software or run the update that is made. So in case there's any updates into Bitcoin that you don't really align with, or you don't want to run such updates, you can decide for yourself. And if enough people also decide this way and have the same mentality as you, then the software that you're running would be the most legitimate, so to speak. And this really was very helpful back when we had the block size wars, because enough people ran the software that we currently use as Bitcoin. Those are the main three things that you should think about in order to avoid the risk of, your Bitcoin being undermined and no longer serving the purpose that you need. So it is, having your cash balances in Bitcoin, using Bitcoin on-chain as much as possible, and running your own node. These are the three main things that you should really think about. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, leave them in the comments down below. And if you want to reach out again, my email is in the description of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.